Why is Apple opposing the idea of side-loading apps on iPhone? This is the second time in the last few months that Apple has defended its stance of not allowing apps outside of the Apple App Store or a third-party app store. As the European Union puts more pressure on Apple to allow side-loading of apps, an alternative app store on iOS, Cupertino Wednesday made a case against the argument by publishing a 31-page white paper describing how this move could cripple the privacy and security protection of iPhones. This is the second time in the last few months that Apple has defended its stance of not allowing apps outside of the Apple App Store or a third party app store. We explain why sideloading of apps isn't allowed on the iPhone and the potential impact of European Union's proposal law to regulate big tech and reshape the digital environment. Apple's warning sideloading iOS apps could increase cybercrime. In the white paper, Apple reasoned why it opposed to the idea that downloading apps should not be allowed from outside of its app store. If Apple were forced to support sideloading, more harmful apps could reach users because it would be easier for cyber criminals to target them, even if sideloading were limited to third-party app stores only. But what is sideloading of apps? Simply put, sideloading apps means installing apps that aren't available in Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. This is in a new way, a new method that lets you download apps that you wouldn't otherwise be allowed to run on your smartphone. Google does not allow sideloading of apps, but Apple doesn't due to its strict App Store policies and security net built inside the operating system. To download apps from third-party app store or directly from the web browser on your iPhone, you need to jailbreak the device. Meanwhile, sideloading an Android device involves changing permission to allow the installation of apps from unknown sources. Most people don't need to sideload apps on their phones. Sideloading can be useful if the app you wish to download and install isn't available in your country. The problem with sideloading is that you cannot trust the source from where the app is being downloaded, as there is a high chance of malware being injected onto your phone. The Apple paper cites research from the cybersecurity services provider Kaspersky Labs showing that the devices powered by Google's Android operating system have been between 15 and 47 times more malware infections than iPhone. Apple says because Android has a poor security mechanism, it supports sideloading. In a 16-page research paper building a trusted ecosystem for millions of apps, a threat analysis of sideloading published in June, Apple said since downloading apps is possible on Android through third-party apps, sideloading increases the risk of malware being shotted into the devices. So when the research paper was released, Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic Games and a staunch Apple critic, characterized the report of a sea of lies. If Apple were forced to support sideloading via direct download and through third-party app store, iPhone's users would have to constantly be on the lookout for scams, never sure whom or what to trust, and as a result, users would download fewer apps from fewer developers, Apple report says. European Union building pressure on Apple to allow app side loading. The European Union, which has become the world's top regulator, wants big tech to comply with the new rules. The Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act, two new proposed laws that serve different purposes, will require companies to change how they operate. The proposed Digital Markets Act in Europe could lead to major changes for the App Store and pre-installed first-party applications on the iPhone, impacting Apple's business model to the core. Margaret Vestager, who is both the tech chief and executive vice president of the European Commission, has accused Apple of using privacy and security concerns to fend off the competition on its App Store. In June, Apple CEO Tim Cook claimed that the proposed reforms to the App Store are not in the best interest of the user and would destroy the security of the iPhone. The current DMA language that is being discussed would force sideloading on the iPhone, and this would be an alternative way of getting apps onto the iPhone. Lawmakers want more competition in the App Store marketplace. Lately, Apple has been on the radar of regulators for its tight control over the App Store and the business model it operates. The App Store has been a major driver of 17.48 billion in service revenue generated in the most recent quarters. Apple also takes a cut as much as 30% of revenue generated by apps distributed through its App Store. But it's not just European Union regulators who want the competition to grow in the App Store market. A similar political pressure on Apple is also coming from Washington. In August, the Open Apps Market Act, which was introduced in both the US House of Representatives and the US Senate, that aims to give Apple users more control over which apps to download on their devices. It could prohibit Apple from blocking side loading on its popular iPhones and iPads. Companies like Epic Games, Spotify, Match Group, and Tile have created the Coalition for App Fairness, a group aiming to create a level playing field for app business and give people freedom of choice on their devices. Both Apple and Google have been accused by app developers of having tight control over their app stores, becoming a sort of gatekeeper with enormous market power. Thank you.